What if I told you that our world is full of misunderstood mysteries, difficult to explain with modern science, which might hide secrets that have never been explained? Mount Rushmore, the White House, the Capitol, millions of people visit these places every year. But what if they aren't just historical symbols, but pieces of something much bigger? In your opinion, do near-death experiences indicate the existence of life after passing away, or can they be explained as chemical reactions of the brain in its final moments? If you have had any near-death experience and wish to share it with us, fill out the form in the description of this video so we can tell your story anonymously, or send us your story to the contact provided in the description. I was gone, no heartbeat, no brain activity, for 7 minutes. But what I experienced didn't feel like passing away. It felt more real than this. Doctors said I was clinically gone, flatline, no pulse, no response. But during those 7 minutes, I was somewhere else, and what I saw there still haunts me today. To understand how I ended up in that freezing, violent ocean, you have to understand the armor I wore long before I ever put on a diving suit. I grew up in a central part of the country, born to a single mother in an era where being a single mother was far from accepted. Society looked down on it, and the pressure she faced dictated the chaotic rhythm of my early childhood. She would ship me around from one family to the next, paying them a meager $5 a week to care for me, to house me, to make sure I went to school. I genuinely believe she thought she was doing the absolute best thing for me under impossible circumstances. Unfortunately, in the reality of a child's mind, intentions don't matter as much as presence. In a lot of these substitute families, I was just an extra kid taking up space in the house. I didn't truly belong to their bloodline, their inside jokes, or their family dinners. Kids are incredibly intuitive. They pick up on the subtle energies of a household. They perceive, with crystal clarity, when they are wanted and when they are merely tolerated as a financial transaction. I never ever felt like I was a genuine part of any of these families. It was a profoundly dysfunctional first 7 years of my life. It taught me, perhaps too early, to be fiercely independent and entirely self-reliant. I learned that if I wanted something done, I had to do it myself. If I needed emotional protection, I had to build my own walls. From age 7 to 14, I was finally placed with a family that was a little more grounded, a little more centered. I started to understand what a baseline of normalcy might look like. But just as I began to settle, my mother pulled me out of that environment. She had married, and she suddenly wanted to be my mother again. At 14, I was thrust into a house with a woman I barely knew and a new stepfather I didn't understand. Their household was a battleground of constant arguments. The shouting match became the soundtrack of my adolescence, so I spent a vast majority of my time finding ways to escape. I stayed out late, I isolated myself, and I plotted my exit strategy from a life that felt completely out of my control. I enlisted in the military service the very moment I could. I couldn't afford a college education on my own, and the service offered a clear pathway to endure the discipline, earn the money, and fund my engineering degree. I became a mechanical engineer in the Navy. The structure of the military combined with the rigid laws of thermodynamics and mechanics suited me perfectly. Machines made sense. They didn't argue. If something was broken, you fixed it. I did well. I was productive, efficient, and constantly moving forward. But internally, I had cultivated a deeply cynical philosophy. My worldview was simple. I am going to cut my own swath through life, and I don't care who gets in the way. I was incredibly narrow-focused. I had a defined sense of direction, and if you stepped into my path, I would drive right through you without a second thought. I was a young man practically entirely devoid of empathy. When I transitioned out of the service, I immediately became a commercial diver. I had discovered scuba diving when I was younger, finding a strange solace beneath the surface of the water, where the noise of the world was muted. I wanted to combine my expertise in mechanical engineering with the high-stakes environment of diving. Eventually, I worked my way up to become the chief engineer of a prominent oceanic research vessel. I was the man in charge of absolutely anything that moved, pumped, or required mechanical maintenance on that enormous ship. It was, without a doubt, my absolute dream job. There was no standard rule book for the pioneering work we were doing out there in the deep ocean. As the chief engineer, Every single job we took on created entirely new, unprecedented challenges, and my soul fed on that high-pressure environment. Commercial diving in the 1980s was an incredibly dangerous profession. The safety protocols we take for granted today simply did not exist. It was so hazardous that most of us couldn't even qualify for personal life insurance. The actuarial tables looked at the survivability of commercial diving back then and essentially laughed. The risk of passing away was a daily companion. I had many friends and colleagues who suffered catastrophic accidents, men who became permanently embolized, who lost their hearing, who suffered crushing injuries, or who simply never came back up. It was arduous, brutal, tough, and unforgiving work, and I loved every single second of it. The incident happened in 1983, miles off the rugged California coast. Our crew was out there evaluating a brand new remote-operated submarine designed for deep-sea exploration. The day had started relatively normal, but the ocean is a notoriously fickle master. Suddenly, we noticed the atmospheric pressure dropping rapidly. The sky bruised into dark, violent purples and grays. A massive storm was rapidly approaching. We made the collective call to pull the equipment and beat the storm back to the safety of the harbor. We knew that at the mouth of the harbor, where the breakwater meets the open ocean, the swells could become treacherous during a squall. We didn't beat the storm. The storm swallowed us whole. By the time we approached the coastal region, we were facing 25 to 30-foot breakers running right at the breakwater. These weren't just waves. They were moving mountains of dark, crushing water. Running an entire research ship is extraordinarily expensive on a day-to-day basis. Because of logistical schedules and crew rotation requirements, the captain and the design engineers made a fateful decision. We would put a small boat in the water to transport the relief crew to the shore. The vessel chosen was a rubber Zodiac, a rugged, inflatable boat specifically utilized to retrieve heavy submarines in high seas. We possessed an immense amount of confidence in its buoyancy and capabilities. Under normal circumstances, as the chief engineer, I would never go on the small transport boats. My place was in the engine room, ensuring the heart of the ship kept beating. But because this was merely an evaluation run and not a full-scale job, we were operating with a skeleton deck crew. The men manning the deck were completely unfamiliar with the specific navigational layout of this local harbor. The captain turned to me. Because I was effectively the third officer and knew the harbor intimately, it was decided that I would guide this transport trip. We descended into the ship's claustrophobic bosun's locker that evening to retrieve life vests. The vests had been stored in that damp, forgotten locker for so long that they were entirely encrusted with dirt, salt, and debris. We literally had to beat them against the bulkheads to knock the filth off just to slip them over our heads. We ended up looking ridiculous, wrapped tightly in these massive, bulky orange pillows. We leaped down into the heavily rocking Zodiac, the freezing spray already lashing our faces, and began heading toward the shore. We had taken a strict bearing with the ship's radar, so we knew the mathematical vector to the harbor. We could see the faint, blurred glow of the shoreline lighting up the distant rain, but the storm cell directly above us blotted out the moon and stars entirely. It was pitch black. The only visibility was the vague luminescence of the horizon. Our strategy was to maintain a visual line of sight on the flashing harbor buoy, but navigating 30-foot rollers in a tiny rubber boat is a terrifying exercise in physics. We would power the Zodiac up the steep, terrifying face of a massive wave, crest the top for a split second, desperately take a visual bearing on the distant buoy, and then plunge wildly down the backside of the swell into the deep, dark trough, completely losing sight of everything but walls of water. Then we'd have to fight our way up the next one and do it all over again. The disorientation was rapid. It wasn't very long before we completely lost track of the harbor buoy. We had no idea at that exact moment, but the sheer force of the storm's crosswinds and the relentless ocean currents had blown us over a mile south of the safe harbor entrance. We were still a mile offshore, entirely lost in the dark, when we inadvertently entered the breaker zone. These weren't deep-water swells anymore. These were shallow-water breakers, monstrous curling beasts of kinetic energy tearing themselves apart on the coastal shelf. We were powering forward, blind, when the Zodiac drove straight off the sheer cliff of a collapsing breaker. The boat slammed into the trough with bone-rattling force. The very next wave, a massive curling wall of black water, was already towering directly above us. It broke and came crashing down with the weight of concrete right on top of our tiny inflatable. The impact folded the sturdy Zodiac completely in half, snapping it shut like a peanut butter sandwich. Because I was positioned in the very bow of the boat, the violent folding action acted like a massive spring. It catapulted me out of the Zodiac and sent me flying through the freezing air, directly into the raging ocean. I am a highly trained commercial diver. I have spent thousands of hours underwater. I know how to control my heart rate. I know how to suppress panic. But this was an entirely different nightmare. It was the dead of night. There were no streetlights, no moonlight, no reference points. It was absolute, crushing darkness. The turbulence of the water was beyond anything I had ever experienced. I was instantly pulled deep into the washing machine of the breaker, being violently tossed, spun, and tumbled like a worthless rag doll. It was, without exaggeration, the most ferocious and vicious moment of my entire existence. I had absolutely zero control over my own body. My inner ear was overwhelmed. I had totally lost all spatial orientation. I did not know which way was up to the surface and which way was down to the crushing seafloor. I held my breath. You can only hold your breath for so long while your body is burning massive amounts of adrenaline and oxygen fighting against the current. Eventually, the inevitable physiological process of oxygen deprivation begins to set in. As the carbon dioxide builds up in your bloodstream, a strange, deceptive euphoria takes hold. The military and commercial diving schools actually train us to recognize this. They put us in hyperbaric chambers and take us safely into that state of euphoria so we know what oxygen toxicity and hypoxia feel like. But what I was feeling now was overwhelming my senses completely. The euphoria tricks your brain. It whispers to you, convincing you that the burning in your lungs is an illusion. It makes you believe with absolute certainty that you can safely take a deep breath of the surrounding water. It isn't long before your autonomic nervous system overrides your conscious control. My mouth opened. I tried to breathe. I inhaled the freezing, violent salt water deep into my lungs. I drowned. Everything went black, but not like sleep. It was silence, complete silence. The roaring, deafening noise of the ocean, the millions of tons of water crashing and tearing, instantly vanished. I was no longer being aggressively tumbled and beaten. The biting, paralyzing cold of the Pacific Ocean completely disappeared. Then suddenly I became aware. I felt incredibly comfortable. I felt a profound sense of peace. But there was also a pervasive, undeniable feeling that I was not alone in this dark void. There was a presence, something vastly greater than myself, occupying the space with me. I remembered my diving training. I remembered the lessons on oxygen deprivation and the resulting hallucinations. But this was infinitely past any biochemical reaction or euphoria I had ever been trained to recognize. My analytical engineering mind was still functioning, but it was separated from my biology. I was intensely curious. How could I go from the most physically violent, terrifying episode of my life straight into this absolute, undisturbed peace? But I wasn't in my body anymore. I felt like I was being pulled, slowly, into something. At first it was peaceful. Too peaceful. And then I saw it. Far off in the absolute darkness, a tiny, singular pinprick of light appeared. It was impossibly bright, yet it didn't hurt to look at. It instantly commanded my entire attention. I felt a magnetic pull. I realized I was moving toward it, accelerating smoothly through the void. As I got closer and closer to the source, the singularity of light began to resolve into incredible detail. It wasn't just a beam. It was composed of millions upon millions of individual fragments of light. They were all interacting with each other in a mesmerizing, complex dance. If you have ever watched a massive school of sardines in the ocean, or a murmuration of starlings in the sky, where thousands of individuals move in perfect, flawless unison, as if commanded by a single collective mind, these fragments of light were exactly like that. Only their numbers were infinite. At this point, my consciousness was flooded with profound questions. Who am I? What am I? Where does my identity begin and end? I looked down at myself. I say looked, but I had no eyes. I realized that my own energetic essence, my soul, my consciousness, was rapidly transforming, becoming one of these brilliant fragments of light. As I merged with the periphery of this massive structure of light, I was suddenly hit by physical waves of emotion. It was love. But to call it merely love is to do it a massive injustice with our limited human vocabulary. It felt as though I was being tightly, securely wrapped in the thickest, warmest blanket of absolute affection. In our physical world, human beings have a tragic tendency to attach heavy conditions to our love. We say, "I will love you if you behave a certain way. I will love you, but I expect you to love me back in equal measure." It is transactional. It is conditional. But the love radiating from this light was entirely unconditional. It was pure, unadulterated, and perfectly given. It pervaded every single particle of existence. It was so fundamental that I understood, in an instant of cosmic clarity, that this specific vibration of love is the core elementary building block that the entire universe is constructed upon. Gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear forces, they were all secondary mechanics to this foundational force of love. As I drifted deeper into the radiant glow, 3 specific fragments of light broke away from the infinite collective and moved directly toward me. They were welcoming me home. I instantly, intuitively recognized them. They were family, but they were not the fractured, traumatized, temporary families I had lived with in my physical life. This was a greater, ancient family. They were souls that were eternally connected to me, beings who had always been with me, even when I felt the most isolated on earth. Eventually, a dozen more of these brilliant beings surrounded me. The joy radiating from them was intoxicating. They communicated with me, not with vocal cords or sound waves, but through direct, instantaneous transfers of thought and emotion. They told me that we were going to travel much deeper into the light. It wasn't what people describe. No angels, no heaven, just a presence, watching me, and it knew everything about me. Guided by my soul family, we moved into a distinct area within the light that felt incredibly geometric. To my perception, it felt very spherical, perfectly round, encompassing everything. We moved inside this sphere, and time entirely ceased to exist as a linear progression. Suddenly, I began to relive my entire life. It is often called a life review, but that term is much too passive. It is not like watching a movie of your life on a screen. It is a full sensory, multi-dimensional re-experiencing of every single moment you have ever lived. But the most staggering part was the perspective. I didn't just experience my life from my own isolated point of view. My consciousness seemed to fragment into multiple, simultaneous streams. I was suddenly living every interaction from the perspective of everyone I had ever touched, spoken to, or affected. Every time I committed an action, spoke a word, or even harbored a strong thought, I got to physically and emotionally feel exactly how it impacted the other person. If I had been kind, I felt their warmth and gratitude bloom inside my own chest. But as I mentioned, I was a very brash, arrogant, and aggressive young man. I had operated with a ruthless efficiency, cutting people down if they got in my way. I had done and said many things I was profoundly not proud of. When the review reached those darker chapters of my life, the experience became agonizingly difficult. I felt the sharp sting of my own harsh words landing in the hearts of my colleagues. I felt the deep, lingering sting of rejection I had caused others. I felt the exact weight of the pain I had put into the world. I was overwhelmed with a crushing sense of shame. But what made it even more intense was the realization that I wasn't experiencing this alone. My entire soul family, these brilliant, pure beings of light, were intimately connected to my consciousness. They were experiencing my entire life review right alongside me. I was mortified. I felt immense guilt that these pure beings who existed at a state of consciousness far higher and cleaner than anything I had ever known were being forced to intimately feel my cruelty, my selfishness, and my mistakes. But they did not judge me, not for a microsecond. Instead, as I relived my worst moments, they simply poured more love into me. They supported me, held my spiritual essence, and provided a safe container for me to process my own guilt. They helped me understand that every mistake was merely a misstep in a massive, difficult learning process on a dense, confusing planet. Every single detail in the life review was crystal clear. The level of detail was awe-inspiring, but it was also incredibly humbling to realize the terrifying butterfly effect of our daily actions. We affect the world around us in a million unseen ways every single day. Eventually, the chronological review of my past reached its natural conclusion. I reached the exact moment where my lungs filled with water and I passed away in the dark ocean. But the review didn't stop. It kept going. I was suddenly looking forward. I was looking into my own unlived future. This future segment was not quite as sharply defined as the past. It looked like a central illuminated corridor stretching out ahead of me. However, in the periphery of this main path, there were countless branching options available to me. I intuitively understood that the future was not entirely fixed. It was a fluid landscape of free will. I could choose to go this way, or I could choose to veer off that way. It was slightly disorienting because I lacked the grounded focus I had during the review of the past. But through it all, my soul family stayed right beside me, buoying me up with their relentless affection. I didn't hear words, but I understood a message. It wasn't my time. But before I left, it showed me something I can't forget. We moved beyond the spherical room of the life review, transitioning into the very center of the infinite light. I was now directly facing the core presence of the universe. Some people call it the source. Some call it the creator. I understood it to be what we refer to as God. The light itself, this enormous, infinite intelligence, spoke to me. It wasn't a singular booming voice. It spoke in unison, a chorus of millions of frequencies harmonizing into a single, undeniable command. This is not your time. You must return. My reaction was immediate, visceral, and defiant. No way, I communicated back. Absolutely not. I had finally found it. I had found the profound, unconditional love I had been starved of my entire childhood. I had a family here, a pure, radiant family that loved me without conditions, without demanding $5 a week, without fighting, without abandoning me. Furthermore, through my expansive awareness, I could sense the physical state of my body back in the ocean. I knew it was broken. I knew it was violently battered by the wreckage of the Zodiac boat. I don't mean to sound incredibly crass, but from this elevated spiritual perspective, my physical body down there in the freezing water just looked like a slab of cold, useless meat to me. I had absolutely zero desire to cram my expanded consciousness back into that heavy, painful, dying biological suit. And so, relying on my stubborn, independent nature, I did the unthinkable. I actively argued with what I perceived as God. I debated the infinite light. I laid out all my logical engineering arguments for why I should be allowed to stay. Obviously, arguing with the creator of the universe didn't do me much good, considering I am here today telling this story. The infinite light did not argue back. It simply absorbed my defiance with patience. Then, the harmonious voice resonated through the very core of my being one more time. You must return. You have a purpose. That word. Purpose. When our consciousness is freed from the heavy, biochemical limitations of the human brain, we operate with a vastly expansive intelligence. We understand concepts instantly, fully, without the need for language or explanation. With that expansive consciousness, when the light transmitted the concept of my purpose, I understood it entirely. It was a massive, complex, geometric blueprint of what I was meant to do, how I was meant to suffer, how I was meant to heal, and how I was meant to serve. The knowledge was perfectly simple, elegantly efficient, and absolutely undeniable. I knew exactly what that purpose was in that moment. And when you are presented with the pure truth of your own soul's mission by the very fabric of the universe, there is no more argument. There is no choice to be made. You just naturally come to a state of absolute surrender and acceptance. With that final acceptance of my fate, the infinite light shifted, and I found my perspective instantly snapped back to the physical realm. Then suddenly I felt pain again, voices, lights, chaos. I woke up back in my body, but I wasn't the same. I wasn't inside my body just yet. I was hovering outside of it, suspended in the dark, stormy air above the violently churning Pacific Ocean. The three original light beings, the core members of my soul family who had first greeted me, were hovering right there beside me. Together, with a strange, detached curiosity, We observed my lifeless physical body as it was being ruthlessly tumbled and tossed by the black waves. The storm was still raging. A massive wave pushed my limp body violently toward the jagged, torn wreckage of the rubber Zodiac. As my body collided with the boat, the thick nylon bow line of the Zodiac whipped around in the turbulent water and tightly wrapped itself around my right arm. The heavy line rhythmically tapped against my chest as the waves moved the debris. I was completely mesmerized by this chaotic physical display. I hovered there, looking at my cold, battered frame, and a distinct, almost comical thought crossed my expanded consciousness. How in the world is the sheer enormity of who I really am ever going to fit back into that tiny, fragile box of flesh? Before I could ponder it further, physics took over. Another massive wave crashed directly into the floating wreckage of the Zodiac. While the boat had been folded in half, one of the heavy rubber pontoons still trapped a significant pocket of air. The force of the wave hit that pocket and the pontoon violently popped upward to the surface. As the pontoon forcefully breached the water, it violently cinched the nylon line tight around my entangled arm. The upward kinetic energy was so brutal that it physically ripped my arm upward, instantly dislocating my shoulder from its socket and snapping my thumb backwards. I was hovering right there watching it happen. I felt no pain, only fascination, as the mechanical force yanked my lifeless body up from the depths and broke the surface of the raging ocean. Because my spiritual essence was magnetically tethered to my physical form, myself and my 3 soul family members rose rapidly upward through the air to follow the trajectory of the body. We continued to silently observe as my limp form became heavily tangled up in the floating wreckage of the Zodiac. Then, a rapid series of punishing waves hit the debris field. The water repeatedly and brutally pounded my chest cavity against the rigid floorboards of the broken boat. The immense mechanical pressure of the impacts acted like an aggressive CPR maneuver, forcefully expelling a large volume of the freezing salt water that had flooded my lungs. My soul family turned to me. I could feel their profound love and a distinct feeling of bittersweet farewell. They gave my energetic form a gentle, loving push. Instantly, I slammed back into my physical body. If passing away is an easy, peaceful release, I have to tell you, coming back to life is the most agonizingly difficult trauma imaginable. 1 second, I was existing as an infinite being of light, experiencing boundless joy, unconditional love, and expansive knowledge. The next second, I was violently compressed into a tiny, heavy, freezing, restrictive biological suit filled with unimaginable agony. My shoulder was ripped out of its joint. My thumb was mangled. My lungs were burning like they were filled with acid, and I was violently coughing, desperately trying to rid my airway of the remaining salt water. I could hear the frantic voices of my crewmates over the roar of the storm. They are the absolute, true heroes of this entire story. The protocol in a situation like that, in the dark, in massive breakers, is usually to save yourself. But they had stubbornly stayed on station in the impact zone the entire time I had drowned and crossed over. They were actively risking their own lives, frantically searching the black water for me. One of the divers had managed to hold onto a heavy waterproof flashlight during the wreck. He was desperately sweeping the narrow beam of light across the chaotic surface of the water, screaming my name. I heard them. I tried with all my might to yell back, to let them know I was alive. But when you have aspirated freezing salt water, the delicate tissues of your larynx become so severely inflamed and irritated that your vocal cords simply paralyze. Every time I tried to shout, all that came out was a pathetic, gurgling wheeze. But miraculously, the sweeping beam of the flashlight caught the reflective tape on my crusty old life vest. They spotted me. They aggressively swam through the churning debris and rallied around the tangled wreckage where I was trapped. It took immense physical effort to free me from the bowline. Once we were all finally accounted for, clinging to the remains of the Zodiac, we realized our ordeal was far from over. We still had to navigate the furious surf zone and swim an entire mile through the freezing, violent storm to reach the shoreline. When our boots finally scraped against the coarse sand of the beach, we collapsed. We were battered, bleeding, and utterly exhausted. Because I had a severely dislocated shoulder and a mangled thumb, the pain was excruciating now that the adrenaline was fading. One of the deck crew, a massive, muscular guy, didn't hesitate. He instructed me to lay flat on the sand. He put one heavy boot on my ribs, grabbed my arm with both hands, and violently pulled backward with all his strength. He popped my shoulder back into the socket. Then, running purely on shock, I physically pounded my own hand against the hard, wet sand until my dislocated thumb snapped back into its proper alignment. I laid there on the beach, staring up at the dark storm clouds, feeling as though an 18-wheeler truck had run me over, backed up, and run me over again. As we huddled together waiting for transport, some of my buddies looked at me with deep concern. "Dave," one of them said, shaking his head, "we were looking for you for a really long time out there." "A really long time? You can't hold your breath that long. It's medically impossible. What the hell happened down there?" I looked at them. I thought about the infinite light. I thought about the unconditional love, the soul family, the life review, and the voice of the Creator. And then I looked at my tough, hardened commercial diver friends. "I don't know," I lied, forcing a weak grin. I guess Neptune just didn't like the taste of me and spit me back out. I completely covered it up. In the harsh, unforgiving world I lived and worked in, commercial diving was a macho, deeply pragmatic culture. Because the job was so inherently dangerous, death was an absolute taboo subject. We simply did not talk about the men who didn't come back up. It was bad luck. It was a weakness. Because of that deeply ingrained culture, I felt absolutely certain that I could not share my experience with my mates. If I told them I saw beings of light and spoke to God, they would think my brain had been fried by hypoxia. They would ground me. I would lose my job, my identity, and the only respect I had ever earned. Furthermore, I didn't feel safe sharing it with my fragmented, dysfunctional family either. I had no safe harbor anywhere in my life, so I did what traumatized people often do. I aggressively suppressed it. I tried to mentally pack it away and just live with what I could safely process. The truth is, the experience deeply, profoundly frightened me. It is incredibly hard for the macho, bulletproof commercial diver I was back then to admit that, but it completely rattled my foundation. I possessed absolutely no theological, philosophical, or psychological framework for what I had just lived through. I had no vocabulary to categorize it. I was blindly grasping in the dark, trying to figure out how to continue existing in a three-dimensional world after touching the infinite. I found a coping mechanism. I realized that if I carefully extracted only the elements of the experience that I was intellectually comfortable with, I could shove all the profound, terrifying, mystical elements away. The part I was strangely comfortable with was the life review. I was only in my mid-20s, and through that profound review, I had been forced to see exactly who I truly was. I saw my arrogance, my cruelty, my selfishness. I saw that I had a massive amount of personal work to do. But my pragmatic engineering brain could accept that. I could say to myself, okay, this is the raw data of who you are right now. You can analyze this. You can systematically work on your behaviors to become a better, kinder human being. But the rest of it? The part where my consciousness expanded beyond the universe? The part where I actively argued with the Creator? The overwhelming revelation that I had an ancient, eternal soul family that loved me unconditionally? I frantically tried to bury it. I always describe it like this. I took all those mystical memories, shoved them into a heavy mental box, wrapped that box tightly in 3 layers of duct tape, because every good commercial diver solves their problems with duct tape, took a thick black marker, wrote "Do Not Touch" on the top, and forcefully shoved it into the deepest, darkest corner of my subconscious mind. I desperately tried to just go on with my physical life as if I was just a regular guy who survived a bad storm. But you cannot touch the infinite and remain unchanged. When I slammed back into my physical body on that stormy night, 2 massive problems came back with me. The first was the maddening mystery of my mission. The universe had explicitly told me, you have a purpose. As I was descending back into my body, I knew exactly what that purpose was. But the human brain operates like a heavy filter, a reducing valve that restricts cosmic consciousness, so we can function in a biological reality. As my brain rebooted, the intricate details of that geometric blueprint simply evaporated. It was exactly like waking up from a profound dream, You know you had the answer to the universe just a second ago, but it slowly, painfully dissolves away into the morning light. I no longer understood the purpose, but the heavy responsibility of knowing that I had one haunted my every waking moment. The second, and far more painful problem, was the lingering memory of the love. Not only myself, but almost every experiencer I have ever met struggles intensely with this. After you have physically, spiritually experienced the absolute perfection of pure, unconditional, all-pervasive cosmic love, you become starved for it. You go desperately looking for it here on Earth. I wanted that exact vibration of love in my physical life. I had never felt anything even close to it during my childhood. My entire human experience with love had been highly conditional, fragile, and fraught with pain. So, to suddenly be shown that absolute pure love is the actual baseline reality of the universe creates a desperate hunger. You start searching. You look at your relationships, your career, your friendships, constantly asking, where can I find that? How can I extract that feeling from this world and bring it back into my daily life? It becomes an incredibly dangerous psychological trap. You can become so entirely consumed with trying to artificially recreate the perfect love of the afterlife that you completely detach from the messy, imperfect reality of your current human life. You put your responsibilities aside in a desperate search for the divine. It creates a deep, aching longing, a profound homesickness. Many times, experiencers fall into severe clinical depression in the years following their return. Because that divine love was so prominent, so real, they want it desperately, but they simply cannot find it here in the dense physical plane. The contrast is too painful, so they long to go back. I long to go back. I will tell you honestly. When my biological clock finally runs out, when it is truly my time to permanently return to that light, I will welcome the departure with wide open arms. I will celebrate it, but through years of struggle, I have come to deeply understand the critical importance of living a full, rich, and engaged life here on Earth while I have the privilege to do so. I would never, ever do anything to artificially rush the process or jeopardize the time I have been given. The core issue is that the near-death experience possesses a strange element of hyper-reality. The afterlife doesn't feel like a blurry hallucination. It feels significantly, undeniably more real than the physical world. That is what generates the intense feeling of finally being home. Coming back here feels like being shoved into a dense, foggy simulation. This physical life feels like a heavy dream. I walk around feeling as though I am confined inside this clumsy biological machine, operating with severely limited mental processing power, and I constantly ache to go back home to the light, where I possess the magnificent totality of who I truly am. I have developed a profound personal theory based on my experience. I firmly believe that when our souls incarnate into these physical human bodies, we only bring a tiny percentage of our total light with us. The human nervous system simply couldn't handle the sheer voltage of our entire eternal consciousness. We bring just a small, localized fraction of our light to animate the avatar. But when the body expires and we are finally released from the strict confines of biology, we instantly reintegrate with the massive totality of our being. We merge back with the wholeness of who we really are. There are fleeting moments here on Earth during deep meditation, during moments of pure gratitude, or when we are having a profound spiritual experience where the veil thins and a slightly larger percentage of our total light becomes temporarily available to us. We feel expansive, we feel connected, but then the phone rings, we have to pay a bill, we go about our normal stressful day, and the aperture closes back down. We return to utilizing only that small, necessary percentage of our greater being. Years passed. I left the ocean. The heavy physical toll of commercial diving eventually forced me to transition my career. I used my organizational and systems engineering mindset to pivot into the medical field. Eventually, I became the manager of several busy dialysis programs at a major hospital system. Life was relatively stable, though the deep, unexplainable yearning for the light never fully left me. Then, I started having strange, persistent problems with my back. It was a dull, heavy ache that I couldn't stretch out. Soon after, I started experiencing severe tingling and numbness radiating down my arm. At the time, computers were becoming ubiquitous in the workplace. We were doing significantly more keyboarding and data entry in the hospital administrative offices. I logically convinced myself that the back pain was from poor ergonomics and the numbness was just early onset carpal tunnel syndrome. I completely dismissed the warning signs. But the universe has a way of forcing your attention when you ignore the whispers. One perfectly normal day, I was sitting in my office at the hospital. Without warning, it felt as though a bomb had detonated inside my spinal column. My back literally felt like it exploded. The pain was so immediate, so blindingly absolute, that it stole the breath from my lungs. I was actually scheduled to have a high-level administrative meeting with one of the hospital's vice presidents and regional directors that very hour. I managed to stagger down the hallway, white-knuckled, and walked into their office. I looked at them and gasped, "I am in incredible catastrophic pain. I cannot do this meeting. I am going straight upstairs to the emergency department to present myself as a patient." I made it to the emergency department. They admitted me, stabilized me with heavy narcotics, and immediately began running a battery of intense scans. I was lying on the stiff paper of the examination table in a quiet, sterile room, waiting for the results. The door handle clicked. A nurse walked into the room. The moment I looked at her face, my entire reality aggressively fractured. The universe folded in on itself. I recognized the moment. I didn't just feel a sense of familiarity. I recognized the precise atmospheric weight of the room, the specific angle of the fluorescent light reflecting off the medical equipment, the exact expression on her face. It was a memory from the afterlife. This was the exact highly specific moment I had witnessed during the future projection segment of my life review in the infinite light. It was déjà vu on massive cosmic steroids. The nurse looked down at her chart, and she had tears pooling in the corners of her eyes. I know this moment, I thought to myself, a strange, calm wave washing over my panicked body. I know exactly what is about to happen. A few moments later, the attending doctor walked into the exam room. He looked exhausted. He wouldn't make direct eye contact with me. He started hemming and hawing, nervously shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Well, David," he started, his voice thick with clinical hesitation, "I have to tell you, we found something on the scans." He started rambling, using complex medical terminology, dancing around the brutal truth, talking about dense masses in my lung architecture, anomalies in my bone density, this and that and the other thing. I just sat there. I let him sweat. I honestly let him stumble over his words because, in a deeply surreal way, I was internally playing with the fabric of reality. I was testing the cosmos. I was watching the scene unfold and thinking, is this really going to play out exactly, word for word, the way I experienced it in the light years ago? It did. It worked out perfectly, devastatingly, exactly the way I had seen it. He finally stopped using jargon and delivered the death sentence. I had aggressive, late-stage metastatic lung and bone cancer. It had silently originated as a mass in my lungs, completely asymptomatic for months. From there, the malignant cells had aggressively metastasized into my skeletal structure. The cancer had eaten completely through 2.5 of my major thoracic vertebrae. The excruciating explosion of pain I had felt in my office was the actual structural collapse of my spine. My vertebrae had literally crumbled under the weight of my own body. They rushed me into additional high-resolution scans to map the extent of the spread. The news only got darker. The oncology team found that I had dozens of tumors and malignant lesions completely riddling my hips, burying into the tissue of my brain, and aggressively compromising both of my kidneys. The medical consensus was absolute. There was no surgical option. There was no curative chemotherapy protocol for an infiltration of this magnitude. The hospital staff gently transitioned my care from curative to palliative. They loaded me up with massive, heavy doses of morphine and Percocet just to make the agony of my collapsed spine bearable. The plan was to send me home to die in relative peace. The chief oncologist sat at the foot of my bed. He looked at me with deep sympathy and told me the hardest words a human being can hear: "Get your affairs in order." I had one consulting specialist who reviewed my entire file. I asked him point blank how much sand was left in the hourglass. He looked at the imaging of my brain and spine, sighed heavily and said, "Honestly, you have got 6 to 8 weeks, maximum." But sitting there, heavily medicated and structurally broken, I felt a strange, radiant defiance rise up from the very core of my soul. I looked at the doctor and said, internally, no. Because I remembered the light. I remembered the geometry of the future timeline I had been shown. Yes, I had explicitly seen in my near-death experience that I was destined to suffer from this catastrophic cancer. The geometry of the disease was part of the blueprint. But I had also distinctly seen the path extending beyond the illness. I saw that I was going to live past the cancer. I saw that there was a massive, critical purpose attached to the suffering. The cancer wasn't the end of my story. It was the crucible required to forge the tools I needed to fulfill my mission. Because I knew I would survive, I approached the terminal diagnosis with a psychological strategy that confused every medical professional in the building. I felt that it was absolutely necessary, and I know this sounds incredibly odd to anyone who hasn't touched the void, to use the profound energy of gratitude to fight the disease. This was the exact moment in my life when I actively initiated my deep daily gratitude practice. But I wasn't just expressing gratitude for the nice things, the sunshine, a good meal, or the painkillers. I purposefully, actively forced myself to generate deep, sincere gratitude for the excruciating physical suffering I was enduring. I was grateful for the cancer. I was grateful for the collapsed spine. A lot of people, including my own family and friends, thought the tumors in my brain had finally driven me completely insane. Who was thankful for bone cancer? But I understood a cosmic loophole. It is simple logic. If you claim to be grateful for the gift of life, you cannot cherry-pick only the comfortable parts. If you are going to be in a state of true gratitude, you have to be radically grateful for the totality of the experience. You must be thankful for the dark just as much as the light, because the dark is where the deepest growth occurs. When you practice radical gratitude for your pain, you eventually reach a profound frequency of emotional sincerity that perfectly aligns with the vibration of the divine. Pure, unfiltered gratitude instantly stops the frantic, terrified ego. It quiets the screaming fear of mortality. It brings you to a point of absolute, crystalline stillness. And only in that profound state of internal stillness are you able to clearly perceive the intuitive pathway forward. I use that frequency of gratitude as my internal compass. It became my absolute anchor through the darkest nights of agony. Because I was an assistant director at the hospital and understood the internal mechanics of the healthcare system, I aggressively advocated for myself. I bypassed the standard protocols and personally put together a massive multidisciplinary healthcare team to treat my condition. By this point in my journey, I finally possessed a very strong, mature grasp on my spiritual connection to the universe. I no longer duct taped the box shut. I opened it wide. I used the intuitive guidance I received from the light to ruthlessly evaluate holistic and alternative healing approaches. I didn't abandon Western medicine. I strategically layered it. I asked myself, how can I perfectly balance the aggressive traditional oncology treatments with powerful holistic, energetic, and nutritional approaches? I treated my body like a complex engineering system that needed massive energetic and physical overhauls, and the universe responded to the blueprint. Within 6 months of being handed a maximum 8-week terminal death sentence, after a grueling combination of spiritual surrender and aggressive, holistic medical intervention, we were completely, totally cancer-free. The lesions in my brain vanished. The tumors in my kidneys dissolved. My collapsed spine stabilized. The doctors called it an unexplainable anomaly. I called it the fulfillment of a promise made in the light. If I could distill the absolute truth of what I learned from dying in the violent ocean and healing from terminal cancer, it is this. Life itself is a magnificently complex, beautifully designed adventure. I never, ever realized that profound truth before my near-death experience. Before I drowned, I thought life was just a brutal, mechanical competition where you had to violently take what you wanted before you passed away and turned to dust. But especially in the intense, multifaceted reflection of the life review, you are given the ultimate cosmic perspective. You get to clearly see how the universe actually functions. Even though we only bring a tiny percentage of our eternal light with us into these heavy physical bodies, we are still completely, undeniably integral to the massive, unfolding experience of cosmic oneness. We are quite literally the universe experiencing itself. Every single one of us is an essential, beautiful fragment of the exact same divine architecture. We are all playing out a massive, complicated play. While we are down here on this dense, difficult, beautiful planet, we possess an incredible opportunity. More than that, we hold a profound spiritual responsibility. We are required to try, with every ounce of our limited energy, to be the absolute best, kindest, most empathetic person we can possibly be. The ripple effects of our actions, the smiles we give, the patience we show, the love we unconditionally offer, create energetic waves that stretch across the entire universe in ways we cannot even begin to comprehend with our human brains. All the strange, unexpected avenues that this responsibility leads us into are nothing short of amazing. A lot of times, we look back at the difficult chapters of our life with the benefit of hindsight. We look at the trauma, the abuse, the failures, and the illness, and we say, wow, I survived that. And even though there was a massive amount of suffering in that dark chapter, on the backside of it, we realized that we learned a critical lesson. We developed empathy. We discovered our own profound strength. We benefited by surviving the fire. We see that the suffering was never a punishment. It was always a highly specialized curriculum. Even though life on Earth gets incredibly hard, confusing, and painful, we must remember that we are never acting alone. We are actively co-creating our reality with everyone else, constantly supported by the unconditional love of the unseen universe. Yes, my soul constantly aches. I deeply long to go back to the infinite light where existence is perfectly expansive, where my soul family waits, and where love is the only atmosphere. But you know what? The messy, painful, beautiful work that we are doing right here, right now, in these heavy bodies, on this confused planet, is just as important. It is just as sacred. It is just as deeply meaningful as the perfection of heaven. Because what I saw in those 7 minutes, I have started seeing it again, even now. The profound truth is that the love I thought only existed in the afterlife is actually woven into the very fabric of our everyday world. We are just too distracted, too busy, and too afraid to recognize it. The lessons of that infinite light, unconditional compassion, radical gratitude even in the face of terminal suffering, and the deep understanding that our every action touches the soul of another, have the absolute power to transform our chaotic lives. When we stop trying to control the ocean and simply learn to float in the current of our shared humanity, we become the very beings of light we seek. Regardless of what you believe comes after our final breath, the undeniable truth is that living fully, loving unconditionally, and finding purpose in our deepest pain makes us infinitely better versions of ourselves right here, right now. And that raises one last question. What else is still hidden in plain sight? Let us know what you thought about this incredible journey in the comments below. Do you believe we only bring a fraction of our light to this world? Share your thoughts and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more unexplainable, life-changing experiences.